What's up, everybody? White Sox Daily, Aaron Feely back here again as we jump right into the new week. A little bit of White Sox news over the weekend, some free agency news for the first time in quite some time for the White Sox. We've heard some big talk from Chris Getz throughout most of the offseason about how aggressive they were planning to be through this offseason. We hadn't seen a great deal of it, other than, of course, the big time Murakami signing. Still, obviously a huge deal for the Chicago White Sox. We didn't expect them to go out and spend like the Los Angeles Dodgers or anything, but nice to see them make another fairly big name deal here as they've brought in another pitcher into the rotation here. Not into the rotation, but into the bullpen, that it is currently believed, according to Jeff Passan, will be the presumed closer for the Chicago White Sox this year. So Leah Shore more than likely going to go back to just kind of, late inning, seventh, eighth inning type work, as Seranthony Dominguez, brought in from the Toronto Blue Jays, spent a couple of seasons before that with Baltimore, was primarily a Philadelphia Philly before that, a guy who was really solid in 2018, but then kind of, pittered and pattered around the general vicinity of good to really good, and then had a really, really solid season last year with both Baltimore and Toronto after he was traded halfway through the season. A guy that can really get up there with some of those fastballs, just an absolute fireball thrower in Dominguez, and someone that was reliably called upon for both of those teams in high leverage situations. He wasn't primarily a closer for either of them last year, but he did a couple of spot closes here and there, had a couple of big eighth inning appearances for Toronto in the previous season. And then, of course, he's had some closing experience, particularly in 2024, which was his career high in saves. And the White Sox are hoping that they get something similar to that this coming year. Coming off a year where he had a low threes ERA, a guy that's fairly solid with getting the K rate up there and doesn't walk too many guys. So he's someone that likes to keep the bases fairly clean, throws some ridiculously fast fastballs, and the White Sox bring him in for 2 years, $20 million. Should be a really solid signing for the Chicago White Sox. Obviously, pitching of any capacity was high up on their priority list. Still not totally sure what's going on with the starting rotation. We keep hearing rumblings that Newcomb thinks that he's going to be, starting as many games as possible. We'll still see how that goes on as the season continues. But this should pretty well shore up their closing situation, at least for the next 2 seasons. And that's something that really will help with the Chicago White Sox ability to attack the rest of their pitching scenarios here, as far as what else they want to do in the bullpen, who they want to potentially move to get some starts out of, all kinds of flexibility created with this move. I really like it. I think Dominguez adds a lot of value to the Chicago White Sox. And if you want to try to compete for not even necessarily to be a high-end, World Series contender, or even try to compete. I think they'll try to compete for the division. I think this will be a lot more interesting of a season than some of the last couple of seasons, and particularly because I don't really have a tremendous amount of faith in the American League Central. A lot of these teams stack up wins the last few years and kind of bolstered their win-loss record because they were beating the White Sox so much head-to-head. I think the White Sox will put forth a little bit more fight within the division this year, and hopefully at least just keep things interesting into August. For right now, that's all we can really ask. It's still kind of the low tier of the rebuild. You're still kind of at the foundational process, trying to put the rebuilt team together so then you can build on top of it. Right now, you're still in that foundational phase. If you can just play moderately meaningful baseball in August, if they can be within single-digit games come August 1st, to the point where we think the season's about over, but you're still holding out hope, maybe a big win streak will get it done. as long as we have that minimal hope heading into August, I'll take it. I will take it in 2026, and this is one step to get there. Is you have to fix the issues with the blown leads that they had last season. And I think bringing in a guy like Dominguez does wonders for that. He's going to net you a couple more wins just in close ball game scenarios by himself, and I think that'll really help in establishing a slightly more competitive 2026 than we got in 2024, 2025. Another bit of news in the White Sox stratosphere here is their interest in free agent Harrison Bader coming to life, which, as we can look at the article here on SouthsideShowdown.com, they kind of break down their own opinion on the matter, which I somewhat share, in regards to Harrison Bader and the potential trap that exists with him coming off of a career-high season. On one hand, it looks like, if you go out and you make that signing, it is a human being with functioning legs that presumably owns his own baseball glove that you can put out in the outfield. And right now, the White Sox need as many of those as they can find. On the other hand, he's 31 years old. He's a guy that primarily, when he was with the St. Louis Cardinals, was valuable as a defender and a base stealer. We're not sure how much more mileage he's got in those wheels necessarily. But from an offensive standpoint, coming off of a career-high year last year, a guy that was hitting 778 OPS before the trade deadline and actually increased it once he got to Philadelphia. He ended up hitting 305 with the Phillies, 17 home runs throughout the season. That was a career high 796 OPS. A guy that was really coming into his own and producing at the plate, something that was a major criticism of his in his time in St. Louis for much of his career. Then he ends up with the Twins last year. A little bit disappointing at the beginning, ends up starting to heat up as the year was going on, and then once the trade happened, that's when he really took off and ended up putting a cap on what ended up, we already said, a career season for him. The issue is, considering he was 31, is this a scenario of a guy finally clicking in a contract year, or was this just an anomaly? And all of the signs right now point to a possible anomaly. So buyer beware on Harrison Bader right now. If it ends up being the signing the White Sox go with to fill the outfield for a year, then so be it. Hopefully it works out. I am just very hesitant to show any optimism towards a Harrison Bader signing at this time. I'd feel a lot better with any of these other outfielder veterans that are still available. And if you can't land any of those guys, I mean, at this point, you sign Harrison Bader. Is that really that much different than just giving one of these young minor league dudes that you've signed with upside in mind a bit of an opportunity? I don't really know. I mean, that's all I really got on that one. Speaking of minor league signings, though, the Chicago White Sox also over the weekend completed another one of their minor league signings, trying to bring in a bit more upside, signing Tyson Miller to a minor league deal. Had a pretty solid season in 2024 with both Seattle and the Chicago Cubs. Not a guy with tremendous heat or velocity on his fastball. But again, he had a really, really solid 2024, ended up going 5-1, 54 strikeouts in just 62 innings pitched. That's not bad. He ended up getting the hip injury in 2025 that prevented him from playing whatsoever. It's not really known how that's going to affect him in 2026 as of just yet. Not really known if he's going to be any sort of a bounce back type of player out of that. But if he can be anywhere near what he was in 2024, I'd say that's a really solid signing and another addition to this bullpen for the Chicago White Sox. So yeah, Tyson Miller ends up in Chicago. Let us know in the comment section below if you have any sort of expectations for Miller. Or if this is just one of those things where you'll take it if you can get it, but for the most part, you're just kind of putting it in the back of your mind and you'll forget about him come spring training. And then the final bit of topic we're going to touch on before today's video ends. With the trade of Luis Robert, as you look through the presumed starting lineup as it stands right now, do the White Sox now find themselves in a really bad pinch as far as the desperate need for more power hitters? The way it lines up right now, it's looking like Lenyn Sosa, probably not an everyday player. He led the team in home runs last year. That would be an unfortunate use considering the power outage that the Chicago White Sox kind of have in this lineup right now. So imagine Lenyn Sosa's not out there. It's probably going to be Chase Meidroth for his defense. You got Colston Montgomery. You know he can slap him. You know Murakami's got power once he kind of acclimates to the major league speed. So there you go. You got two. Miguel Vargas sometimes. He's shown some flashes of power. Not sure that that's something you can rely on a daily basis, so we'll count that as half a power hitter. Kyle Teal, he can hit it, out of the stadium. To this point, he's been more of a contact hitter. Same with Edgar Cuero, guys that can get you singles and get on base. You'd like for your catchers to display more power, and both these guys are young and can develop, but as of right now, it's not a massive part of their game. We don't have a great deal of power in the outfield. Benintendi was the top home run hitter of the presumed outfielders that we've got going right now, and that's Andrew Benintendi. Chase Meidroth, we just talked about, going to be in there for his defense. If you can get a home run out of him in 2026, the gods have smiled upon us. And yeah, with 2.5 guys that you can reliably think of as power hitters in this lineup, it's really going to create some disadvantages, I can only imagine, come setup time and line assessment time. When you're going into some of these games, knowing that teams can absolutely just pitch around Murakami and Montgomery when they want to, because there's not a great deal of protection for those two guys, and you're definitely just not going to have many threats at the back end of this lineup. 2020's team and 2021's team, this is not any longer when you had games with Eloy Jimenez batting 8th. That's just not going to be what the 2026 White Sox are looking like this year. So it's going to be interesting how much offense they're going to be able to generate once you get past the 2 and 3 or the 3 and 4 hole, however they decide to split Montgomery and Murakami up. Once you're 5 through 9, you have to imagine there's not going to be a great deal of extra base hits in that back end of the lineup. So we'll have to see how they kind of attack that and see what kind of offense they can still generate. But that'll do it for White Sox Daily today. I've been Aaron Feely, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow.